surroundings cleaner than before it was built. This is the development model Africa needs, one that heals past damage while creating future prosperity. The inauguration ceremony itself reflected the project's community-centered approach. Rather than the traditional ribbon-cutting limited to dignitaries, hundreds of waste cooperative members participated, each cutting a small section of a recycled metal chain that encircled the facility. The symbolism was unmistakable, breaking the chains of exploitation while celebrating the collective achievement. Among those cutting the chain was Fatimata Zongo, a 42-year-old former waste picker now serving as coordinator for the women's cooperative that supplied the facility. "Today I cut this chain as a business leader, not as someone who has to beg for work," she declared. "My cooperative has 200 members, all women, many of them single mothers who can now provide for their families with dignity." The SSM project had attracted international attention, though responses varied significantly. Environmental organizations largely praised the initiative, with the Global Alliance for Sustainable Resources calling it a groundbreaking model for responsible e-waste management in developing nations. Technical experts who had initially expressed skepticism about Burkina Faso's capacity to develop such sophisticated processing capabilities were now studying the facility's innovations. More mixed was the reaction from multinational recycling corporations, many of which had built business models around shipping e-waste from wealthy countries to low-cost processing locations in Asia. A spokesperson for one such company dismissed the SSM project as small-scale and unlikely to impact global e-waste flows significantly, though this assessment contradicted the facility's demonstrated capacity. Perhaps most telling was the response from neighboring African nations. Within months of the Ouagadougou facility's operation, delegations from Ghana, Senegal, Mali, and Côte d'Ivoire had visited to study the model. Plans for similar facilities adapted to local contexts, but following the same core principles were already underway in several countries. What Burkina Faso has shown us is that we don't need to wait for foreign companies or aid organizations to solve our waste problems, noted Ghana's environment minister after his visit. We have the knowledge, the workforce, and the motivation to develop our own solutions that keep resources and value within our economies. The broader significance of the SSM project extended beyond waste management. It represented a tangible example of what President TRAORE had termed technological sovereignty, the capacity of African nations to develop and control the technologies essential for their development. For too long, Africa has been told that we can only be users of technology, not creators, TRAORE had argued. We are told to wait for solutions to be developed elsewhere and then transferred to us, usually at high cost and with many strings attached. The SSM project proves this narrative false. We have developed our own solution, adapted to our own context under our own control. This emphasis on technological sovereignty guided every aspect of the project's implementation. The facility had been designed by Burkina Faso engineers with targeted international expertise, brought in only where absolutely necessary. The equipment used a combination of locally manufactured components and imported elements that had been specifically modified for local conditions. Most importantly, the intellectual property behind the innovations belonged to the Burkina Faso Scientific Research Institute, not to foreign corporations or consultants. We made a fundamental decision at the beginning that this would not be a black box technology that we simply operate but don't understand, explained Dr. Ouedraogo. Every process, every system in this facility is fully understood by our team. We can maintain it, modify it, and improve it ourselves. This is true technological ownership. This approach had initially slowed the project's implementation. Developing local capacity took time, and there were inevitable setbacks and adjustments along the way. Foreign critics pointed to these challenges as evidence that African nations should simply adopt proven technologies from elsewhere, rather than reinventing the wheel. They missed the point entirely, responded Dr. Kanit. Yes, it took us longer. Yes, we made some mistakes and had to correct them. But now we have not just a facility, but the knowledge and capacity to replicate it, improve it, and adapt it to new challenges. That capability is far more valuable in the long term than a turnkey solution that we don't fully understand or control. The project's financing structure similarly reflected its sovereignty-focused approach. Rather than relying primarily on foreign loans or aid, the SSM project had been funded through a combination of government investment, domestic bank financing, and an innovative resource future mechanism that allowed the facility to leverage the future value of recovered metals. We specifically avoided arrangements that would give external actors control over our operations or claim to our outputs, noted Finance Minister Sanu. This facility belongs 100% to the people of Burkina Faso, 60% through the government, and 40% through the worker cooperatives. The profits stay here, the decisions are made here, and the future development path is determined here. This ownership structure was particularly important, given the valuable materials being recovered. The facility was currently producing approximately 80 kilo of gold annually, along with larger quantities of silver, palladium, and copper. As capacity increased, these outputs were expected to grow significantly. The gold in particular had symbolic as well as economic importance. Burkina Faso was already a significant gold producer through traditional mining, but much of this production was controlled by foreign companies that exported the raw ore or performed only preliminary processing before shipping material abroad. The gold recovered at the SSM facility was being processed to 99.99% purity on site, then transferred to the national reserves or used in a newly established jewelry manufacturing initiative that created additional value and employment. There is a certain poetry to extracting gold from waste that was dumped on us, reflected Cultural Minister Adamama Dembele. It speaks to Africa's resilience and creativity, our ability to find value where others see only problems. These gold bars represent not just economic value, but a philosophical statement about our place in the world. Beyond its direct impacts, the SSM project was catalyzing broader changes in Burkina Faso's approach to waste management and resource recovery. Phase 2, already under construction in Bobo Dioulasso, would expand beyond electronic waste to process other urban waste streams for both material recovery and energy generation. A network of smaller satellite facilities was being developed in regional centers, creating a national infrastructure for sustainable resource management. Education and research institutions were evolving in response as well. The University of Ouagadougou had established a new department of circular economy and resource recovery, with students engaged in research to further improve the SSM processes. Technical schools were developing specialized programs to train the growing workforce needed for these facilities. We're creating not just a facility but an ecosystem, explained Education Minister Salia Matada. This includes research, education, manufacturing, services, and creative industries, all centered around the principle of extracting maximum value from materials that pass through our economy. It's a new development model that builds on our strengths, rather than trying to copy foreign approaches. This ecosystem approach was evident in the small business incubator established adjacent to the main facility. Here, entrepreneurs were developing enterprises based on materials recovered from the waste stream, but not processed in the main facility. From refurbished electronics to artistic creations using recovered components. Ibrahim Kone, a young engineer who had returned from studies abroad to join the project, had established a business producing solar chargers from recovered components. I had job offers from tech companies in Europe, but I came back because this is where the real innovation is happening. He explained, "We're not just applying existing technologies. We're creating new approaches born from our specific challenges and opportunities." This sentiment was echoed by many of the young professionals working on the project. For a generation that had often seen limited opportunities in their home country, the SSM project and similar initiatives represented a new possibility. The chance to apply advanced skills in meaningful work that directly benefited their communities. The project's impact on national pride was palpable. School groups regularly toured the facility, and images of the processing systems and the gleaming recovered metals appeared in textbooks and public spaces. What had once been a symbol of Africa's exploitation, mountains of toxic waste dumped by wealthy nations, was being transformed into a source of inspiration and self-respect. My granddaughter came home from her school visit and told me, "Grandpa, we are turning trash into gold," recounted Elder Mumuni Sawogo during a community meeting. The pride in her voice that is worth more than all the gold in the facility. Our children are growing up seeing that Burkina Faso can solve big problems, can create modern technologies, can build a better future with our own hands. This narrative of self-determination resonated deeply in a nation with Burkina Faso's history. The country still honored the memory of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader. The world which once viewed Africa as a dumping ground is now watching in amazement. We are turning this waste into millions of dollars worth of treasure. Our waste management system not only cleans up our environment, but also strengthens our economy and provides our people with dignified jobs. President Ibrahim Traore's words resounded through the newly inaugurated Sustainable Metals Management SSM facility on the outskirts of Ouagadougou. Before him stood a marvel of engineering and innovation, a complex that was transforming what had once been a festering electronic waste dump into a source of precious metals. The facility, spanning over 12 hectares, represented not just an environmental solution, but a profound economic and political statement about Africa's ability to redefine its relationship with global waste and resource extraction. For decades, Africa had served as the world's unofficial dumping ground for electronic waste. Millions of tons of discarded computers, smartphones, televisions, and other devices from wealthy nations found their way to African shores through both legal and illegal channels. This toxic flow had created environmental and health crises across the continent, with impromptu processing sites where desperate workers, often including children, burned or acid-leached components to extract small amounts of valuable metals, exposing themselves and their communities to dangerous pollutants. Burkina Faso had not been immune to this phenomenon. By 2023, electronic waste dumps had proliferated around major urban centers, creating health hazards and environmental degradation. The conventional wisdom held that poor African nations had little choice but to accept this reality, either ban the waste entirely and lose the limited economic activity it generated, or continue allowing dangerous informal processing with its devastating health consequences. President Traoré rejected this false dichotomy. The problem is not the waste itself, he had explained when first announcing the SSM initiative in late 2024. The problem is, who controls the processing of this waste? Who captures its value and who bears its costs? We are going to transform this equation completely. The SSM project emerged from a partnership between the Burkina Faso government, the National Institute of Scientific Research, and a network of community cooperatives. Rather than following traditional Western models of waste management or attempting to replicate Asian recycling facilities, the project developed a uniquely African approach based on three core principles: community ownership, technological sovereignty, and environmental justice. The facility that Traoré was inaugurating represented phase one of this ambitious vision. At first glance, it resembled industrial complexes found worldwide with receiving areas, processing lines, and storage facilities. But closer inspection revealed significant innovations specifically adapted to Burkina Faso's context. What makes our approach revolutionary is not just what we do, but how we do it, explained Dr. Fatimata Wadago, the lead engineer on the project and a specialist in metallurgical processes. We've designed systems that are appropriate for our economic reality, our available workforce, and our specific waste stream. This isn't a copy-paste of foreign technology. It's a Burkinabe solution to a global problem. The process began with collection. Rather than relying solely on centralized collection points, the SSM project mobilized an extensive network of community-based collectors. These workers, previously informal waste pickers who had operated in dangerous conditions for minimal compensation, were now organized into cooperatives with proper equipment, training, and fair compensation structures. Before I would burn cables to get the copper, and the smoke would make my chest hurt for days, recounted Adama Sawadogo, who had worked in informal e-waste processing for 7 years before joining the SSM cooperative. Now I have protective gear, a regular salary, and health insurance. Most importantly, I have dignity. I'm not just a waste picker. I'm an environmental technician. Upon arriving at the facility, the e-waste underwent a sophisticated sorting process. Unlike fully automated systems in wealthy countries, the SSM facility employed a hybrid approach that balanced technology with human labor, creating more jobs while still achieving high efficiency rates. Our system is labor-optimized, not labor-minimized, noted Dr. Wedriogo. Where it makes sense to use automation, such as for detecting and sorting different metal types, we use it. Where human judgment and dexterity are superior, we employ people. This creates 4 times as many jobs as a fully automated system while still being economically viable. The most revolutionary aspect of the facility was its metals recovery process. Traditional e-waste recycling typically relies on either high-temperature smelting, energy-intensive and polluting, or hydrometallurgical processes using harsh chemicals. The SSM facility pioneered an innovative biohydromergical approach, using bacteria to help extract precious metals in an environmentally friendly manner. This biological approach was particularly well suited to Burkina Faso's circumstances. It required less energy than smelting, produced fewer toxic byproducts, and could be scaled according to need. Crucially, the bacteria cultures were produced locally, creating another value-added component rather than a dependency on imported materials. We're actually using bacteria strains native to Burkina Faso, explained Dr. Moussa Konate, the microbiologist who developed the system. Our research institute isolated these microorganisms from old mining sites where they naturally leach metals from rocks. We've simply optimized this natural process and applied it to e-waste. The results were remarkable. From the toxic circuit boards, damaged smartphones, and obsolete computers that entered the facility, the SSM project extracted gold, silver, platinum, palladium, copper, and rare earth elements, all valuable commodities on global markets. A ton of smartphones contained 100 times more gold than a ton of gold ore, making this urban mining potentially more lucrative than traditional extraction. The economic impact was substantial. In its first 6 months of operation, the facility had processed approximately 3,000 tons of electronic waste, recovering metals valued at over $15 million. Projections suggested that at full capacity, the SSM project could generate $50 to $60 million annually in recovered metals, while employing more than 2,300 people directly and thousands more in the collection networks. This is circular economy in action. President Traore declared during the inauguration, "We are turning a liability into an asset, pollution into resources, and waste pickers into skilled technicians. But most importantly, we are keeping the value of these resources in Africa where it belongs." This final point underscored the project's political significance. For centuries, Africa's relationship with the global economy had been defined by resource extraction, with foreign companies removing valuable minerals from African soil, processing them abroad, and selling finished products back to African consumers at premium prices. Electronic waste represented this exploitative relationship in microcosm. Devices made with African minerals that returned as waste once their value had been extracted elsewhere. The SSM project directly challenged this paradigm. By developing the capacity to process e-waste and recover its valuable components, Burkina Faso was reclaiming a position in the value chain that had previously been denied to African nations. When foreign companies extract gold from our land, they typically pay 3 to 5% in royalties to our government, explained Finance Minister Ibrahim Sanu. When we extract gold and other metals from e-waste, 100% of the value stays in our economy. This is the difference between extraction and sovereignty. Beyond its economic and environmental benefits, the project had significant health implications. Informal e-waste processing had created serious health problems in communities across Burkina Faso, with children particularly vulnerable to the toxic substances released during crude recycling attempts. Dr. Isatou Diallo, a public health specialist who had documented these impacts, noted the transformation. In communities where we've shifted from informal to formal processing through the SSM cooperatives, we're seeing dramatic reductions in respiratory problems, chemical burns, and heavy metal poisoning. Children who were previously working in these dangerous conditions are now in school, while their parents have safer, better-paying jobs in the formal system. The project's benefits extended beyond the direct participants. The facility had been designed with an integrated water treatment system that not only handled its own processed water, but also treated additional wastewater from surrounding communities. Similarly, the power generation system, a combination of solar arrays and biogas from organic waste, produced surplus electricity that supported a microgrid serving nearby neighborhoods. We're demonstrating that industrial development doesn't have to mean environmental destruction, said Environmental Minister Mariam Tall. This facility actually leaves its